Hi, folks. Welcome to the Constitution Show, brought to you by the American Constitutional Rights Union, dedicated to defending the constitutional rights of all Americans. I'm your host, Tom McHale, here with co host and producer, that's translation for boss,
Um,
Joe Armacost. Hey,
yeah.
Joe.
Hey, Tom. It's good to be with you. This is a new project for us, and I'm really excited about it. It's short but sweet bits about our Constitution, otherwise known as the Owner's Manual.
Yeah, I like to call it our National Owner's Manual.
There
This
we go,
is
brother.
owning a country's serious business. So we have to know the directions, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, today I wanted to talk about rights. It's my right. We hear a lot about rights on the news, like every day, right?
Yep.
Whatever anybody does, it's my right to do that. So I thought it'd be a good idea to step back and take a look at what natural rights really are and what they aren't, because it's confusing. Because as I'm sure you've seen, there's this thing called rights inflation. It's kind of like regular inflation where things just grow out of control over time. Everything's a right now, according to somebody. Healthcare is a right, housing's a right, jobs with a certain amount of pay is a right, texting while driving is a right. It just goes on and on and on.
I mean, Tom, what exactly is a right? I mean, because everybody thinks they
Yeah.
have them, but I don't think everybody really understands what a right is.
Well, you know what? Let's go to a classic definition. It's a right is a principle that specify how individuals should be treated as a result of them existing. That's it, just existing. People get rights. And I'd like to look at three primary characteristics of rights that really help define, what they're all about. One, they're fundamental. You get them again, just as I said, for existing. That's it. They're universal. They're everywhere. They're not related to a government or a legal system or that. All humans just have them. Third thing, they're inalienable, meaning unchangeable, not revocable, there forever. I think Thomas Jefferson sums it up really well. And he said, nothing is unchangeable but the inherent and unalienable rights of man. So there you go. It's just that simple. So let's if we can, let's bring that to more modern day. And I'll use that term loosely, practical terms. Talking about the founding of our country, a lot of that was influenced by people like John Locke, 17th century great political thinker. He talked about natural rights, and in his definition, he kind of referred to them as life, liberty, and estate. Estate meaning property, possessions, that kind of thing. Our own, 100 years later, our own Declaration of Independence kind of defined rights as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that whole pursuit of happiness kind of throws people sometimes, because it sounds a little strange in modern vernacular, I would say.
And people love that, though, the pursuit of happiness. It's a right.
Yeah, well, I mean, first thing is in those days, pursuit of happiness really meant pursuit of your own well-being, pursuit to be a functioning member of society, without restriction. But what word we keep saying is pursuit, and that is a key point behind the concept of rights. Rights are not owed to us. We only are owed, so to speak, the ability to pursue, life, liberty, and estate, as John Locke said, or pursuit of happiness, as our own declaration said. A right can't be owed to you by anyone. So a right of free college, that's not a natural right. It's a decision, a societal thing we can talk about, but it's not a right. So where do rights come from?
All right.
Real simple: God and nature. You read our own Declaration of Independence, and it says right up front, all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Again, those words from Jefferson. John Adams had a little bit of a different take, and he said, rights are antecedent to all earthly governments, rights that cannot be repealed or restrained by human laws, rights derived from the great legislator of the universe. So seems pretty clear to me, right?
Very cool.
So I think one way to further evaluate this is kind of look at the flip side. Where do rights not come from? That's real simple. Government and laws. So, and this is where a lot of people get hung up. Governments don't create rights. They don't grant rights. You know why our government exists? Seriously, serious question.
Yeah.
Our government, the United States of America, exists for one reason, and that reason is to protect and preserve the rights of its citizens. Period. That is it. So, again, that just kind of reinforces the concept that rights pre-exist everything. The government we choose to form voluntarily only exists to protect those rights. So, hey, you know what? Let's have a little fun. Let's bring this around and talk about how all this applies to modern events. And I would say, when is a right not a right?
All right.
Right? Because everybody, again, rights inflation. Everybody likes to use that term loosely. A right is not a right when it infringes on the rights of others. So they're kind of mutually exclusive, or you might think of it as a zero-sum game. And if we wanted to look at a historical example, we could look back to the Boston Tea Party. We all know that story from elementary school civics and history, right? The Sons of Liberty got mad about all the British oppression and went down to the harbor one night and dumped something like 90,000 pounds of tea into Boston Harbor as a protest. And in today's world, I suspect a lot of people would say, "Hey, that was their right. They were just protesting. They have freedom of speech." Well, there's a right to private property. Remember John Locke and his concept of a state. So private property was sacrosanct. And here's a little interesting story. A couple of people, a couple of our founding fathers got very upset by the whole Boston Tea Party debacle. George Washington and Benjamin Franklin were not at all happy about that. I'll call it a protest, riot, whatever you want to call it. Even though we were on the verge of war with the British, about to start shooting at each other, they said, "Hey guys, that was wrong. That was their private property, and we destroyed it. We cannot do that. They have a right to that private property." In fact, Benjamin Franklin offered to pay for all of the lost tea from that event. Is that crazy?
Beginning of American guilt. Yeah, there you go.
That's a great observation. So that's a historical example of when a right or perceived right is not a right. But if we bring that, to the classic, do you have a right to yell fire in a crowded theater because of the First Amendment, freedom of speech? Well, you do have freedom of speech, but if you think about the yelling fire scenario, that infringes on the rights of others. It infringes on the rights of the other guests. It infringes on the rights of the theater owner who's losing out on revenue and having all the chaos in his place of business that he owns. Do you have a right to protest when you're at work? This brings up a great question about the sports protests a couple of years ago. Yes, they absolutely have freedom of speech. Do they have freedom of speech when they're on the job, on the clock, so to speak? Maybe brings that up under a different light. What about religion? Another First Amendment topic. We all have the freedom to practice religion. But Joe, what if your religion says, as part of worship, you have to go around punching random strangers in the throat?
Well, that's
It's
not
part of your
right.
religion, so you can practice it. But
Well, yeah.
you know what? It's not a right because you're clearly infringing on those random strangers' rights too.
And the other religions would say you have a perfect right to hit Joe back. So I don't think you're
That's
asking
right.
very long,
The religion of revenge, and you
Yes.
had it coming.
Revengeologists. Yes.
Exactly. So, kind of bringing that forward to today with all these college protests. Sure, no one's going to argue with the right to protest, to march, and carry signs, and express your displeasure with whatever the topic is. But once things start crossing over into camping and destroying private property, threatening other people, obstructing the normal course of business that someone else owns, we're infringing on their rights, their safety, their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness or estate, in Locke's words. So that's kind of a quick view of rights. In summary, I like to think of three things that really sum up rights. One, they're a pre-existing condition simply of existing. Two, they're not granted by anyone. Our government only exists to protect natural rights. And three, if you're not sure if something is truly a right, think about whether that something infringes on someone else's rights. It's a good litmus test.
Well, Tom,
Anyway,
I'm going to exercise my rights here and remind you that this is a quickie show. And I think we've run out of the time that kind of keeps us in the quickie area. So it's probably time to sign off. We want to make these shows short for you folks. We want to make them short, easy to listen to, easy to digest, and it doesn't take much time to listen to it. And I reckon we'll be trying to do this, at least 3 times a week, Tom? Something like that.
boy, yeah, frequently. So there's a lot to talk about here.
You weren't ready for the 3 times a week. I can see but that's okay. Maybe I don't know.
Nah, we'll make it happen. So, and that was perfect because I think we wrapped up the topic and we are good to go for
My
the
man.
concept of rights. So thanks for joining us on the Constitution Show. Remember, we are in charge of this country, and while it doesn't seem like it at times, we are also in charge of its government. So we all have to understand how to run this thing and do our part. Until our next time, don't forget to subscribe, share with your friends and family, and if you got something to say, drop us a line at the Constitution Show at theacru.org. Thank you.